Hello, welcome to the stream. I'm Fridtjof Einarsson, and today I will be reading the Saga of the Icelanders, the Íslendinga Saga. More specifically, the Saga of the Greenlanders and the Saga of Eirik the Red. So let me just see if I can pull up chat right here. Hotkeys. I think there's a way I can get it to display, but I just can't seem to find it. Hold on, what is going on here? There we go. I'm using a video, so I'll try and find one that's much longer. So, excuse me one moment. Just make sure. There's no, there we go. I do not know why I can't pull up chat, but oh well. Docs. Chat. There we go. Now I can see chat. Anyways, let us begin our tale. The Saga of the Icelanders. Herjolf was the son of Barð Herjolfsson and a kinsman of Ingolf, the settler of Iceland. Ingolf gave to Herjolf the land between Vog and Reykjanes. At first, Herjolf farmed at Drepstok. His wife was named Thorgerd, and their son was Bjarni, and he was a promising young man. While still a youthful age, he longed to sail abroad. Haven't we all? He soon earned himself a good deal of wealth and a good name, and spent his winters alternatively abroad with his father. Soon Bjarni had his own ship, making trading voyages. During the last winter Bjarni spent in Norway, Herjolf decided to accompany Eirik the Red to Greenland, and left his farm. One of the men on Herjolf's ship was from the Hebrides, a Christian, who composed the Drapa of the Sea Fences. It had this refrain: I ask you, unblemished monk's tester, to be the ward of my travels. May the Lord of the Peak's pain shade my path with his hawk's perch. That is, in common speech, I asked you, unblemished Christ, to be the ward of my travels. May the Lord of the heavens shade my path with his hand. Herjolf farmed at Herjolfsnes. He was the most respected of men. Eirik the Red farmed at Brattahlíð. There he was held in highest esteem, and everyone deferred to his authority. Eirik's children were Leif, Thorvald, Thorstein, and a daughter, Freydís. She was married to a man named Thorvard. and they farmed at Gardar, where the bishop's seat is now. She was a domineering woman, but Thorvard was a man of no consequence. She'd been married to him mainly for his money. Well, isn't that something? Let's continue. If you have any questions or want to just say anything, just let me know in the chat and I'll read it. I'll do what I can. Bjarni, where was I? Heathen were the people of Greenland at the time, so they worshipped the old gods. Okay. Bjarni steered his ship into Eyrar in the summer of the year that his father had sailed from Iceland. Bjarni was greatly moved by the news and would not have his cargo unloaded. His crew then asked what he was waiting for, and he answered that he intended to follow his custom of spending the winter with his father. And I want to set sail for Greenland if you will join me. Okay. All of them said that they would follow his counsel. Bjarni then spoke. Our journey will be thought an ill-considered one, since none of us has sailed the Greenland Sea. Despite this, they set sail once they had made ready, and sailed for 3 days, until the land had disappeared below the horizon. Then the wind dropped, and they were beset by winds from the north and the fog. For many days they did not know where they were sailing. After that, they saw the sun and could take their bearings. Hoisting the sail, they sailed for the rest of the day before sighting land. They speculated amongst themselves as to what this land would be, for Bjarni suspected that this was not Greenland. Narrator, it was not. They asked whether he wished to sail up close into the shore of this country or not. My advice is that we sail in close to the land. They did so, and soon saw that the land was not mountainous, but did have small hills, and was covered with forests. Keeping it on their port side, they turned their sail end landwards and angled away from the shore. Hold on a second. There we go. Let me do a quick docs stream information. I'm not playing Minecraft. I forgot to change that. My apologies. There we go. Anyways, let's continue. They sailed for another 2 days before sighting land once again. They asked Bjarni whether he now thought this to be Greenland. He said he thought this no more likely to be Greenland than the previous land, since there are said to be very large glaciers in Greenland. They soon approached the land and saw that it was flat and wooded. The wind died, and its crew members said that they thought it was advisable to put ashore. But Bjarni was against it. They claimed they needed both timber and water. You've no shortage of these provisions, Bjarni said, but he was criticized somewhat by his crew for this. He told them to hoist the sail, and they did so, turning the stern towards shore and sailing seawards. For 3 days they sailed with the wind from the southwest until they saw a third land. This land had high mountains, capped by a glacier. They asked whether Bjarni wanted to make land here, but he said he did not wish to do so, as this land seems to me to offer nothing of use. This time they did not lower the sail, but followed the shoreline until they saw that the land was an island. Once more they turned in they turned their stern landwards and sailed out to sea with the same breeze. But the wind soon grew, and Bjarni told them to lower the sail and not to proceed faster than both their ship and the rigging could safely withstand. Good captain. They sailed for 4 days. Upon seeing a fourth land, they asked Bjarni whether he thought that this was of Greenland or not. Bjarni answered, "This land is most like what I have been told of Greenland, and will head for shore there." Then they did, and made a land along a headland in the evening of the day, finding a boat there. On this point, Herjolf, Bjarni's father, lived, and it was named for him, and has since been called Herjolfsnes, Herjolf's Point. Bjarni now joined his father and ceased his merchant voyages. He remained on his father's farm for as long as Herjolf lived, and took over the farm after his death. Chapter 2. First, does anyone have any questions about Chapter 1? If there's not, then I will continue with Chapter 2. Hold on a second. Right, so, Chapter 2. Following this, Bjarni Helgafsson sailed from Greenland to Earl Eirik, who received him well. Bjarni told of his voyage, during which he had sighted various lands, and many people thought him short on curiosity, since he had nothing to tell of these lands, and he was criticized somewhat for this. Understandable. So, Bjarni became one of the Earl's followers and sailed to Greenland for the following summer. There was now much talk about looking for these new lands. There we go. Leif, the son of Eirik, and Eirik the Red of Brattahlid, sought out Bjarni and purchased his ship. He hired himself a crew numbering 35 men altogether. Leif asked for his father Eirik to head the expedition. Eirik was reluctant to agree, saying he was getting on in years, and not as good as bearing the cold and wet as before. Leif still said he still commanded the greatest good fortune of all of his kinsmen. Eirik gave in to Leif's urgings, and, when they were almost ready, set out from his farm on horseback. When he had but a short distance left to the ship, the horse he was riding stumbled and threw Eirik, injuring his foot. Eirik then spoke. "I am not intended to find any other land than this one where we now live. This will be the end of our travelling together." Eirik returned home to Brattahlid, and Leif boarded his ship, along with his companions, 35 men altogether. One of the crew was a man named Tyrkir, from a more southerly country. Once they had made the ship ready, they put to sea and found first the land which Bjarni and his companions had seen last. They sailed up to the shore and cast anchor, put out a boat, and rowed ashore. There they found no grass, but large glaciers covered the highlands, and this land was like a single flat slab of rock, from the glaciers to the sea. This land seems to them of little use. Leif then spoke. "As far as this land is concerned, it can't be said of us, as of Bjarni, that we did not set foot on shore. I am now going to name this land and call it Helluland, Stone Slab Land. This is Baffin Island in Canada. They then returned to their ship, put out to sea, and found a second land. Once more they sailed close to the shore and cast anchor, and put out the boat and went ashore. This land was flat and forested, sloping gently seaward, and they came across many beaches of white sand. Leif then spoke. This land will be named for what it has to offer and called Markland, forest land. They then returned to the ship without delay. Markland is present-day Labrador, Labrador Island in Canada, as well as, I believe, if I remember correctly, parts of Newfoundland. After this, they sailed out to sea and spent 2 days at sea with a northeasterly wind before they saw land. They sailed towards it and came to an island, which lay to the north of the land, where they went ashore. In the fine weather, they found dew on the grass, that they collected in their hands and drank, and thought they had never tasted anything so sweet. Well, after being on the boat the whole time, I would understand. So, as a result of this, they returned to their ship and sailed into the sound which lay between the island and the headland that stretched out northwards from the land. They rounded the headland and steered westward. Here there were extensive shallows at low tide, and their ship was soon stranded, and the sea looked far away to those aboard the ship. Their curiosity to see the land was so great that they could not be bothered to wait for the tide to come in and float their stranded ship, and they ran aground where a river flowed into the sea from a lake. When the incoming tide floated the ship again, they took the boat and rowed to the ship, and moved it up into the river, and from there into the lake, where they cast anchor. They carried their sleeping sacks ashore and built booths. Later, they decided to spend the winter there and built large houses. Where was I? Okay, here we go. There was no lack of salmon both in the lake and in the river, and the salmon was larger than they had ever seen before. It seemed to them that the land was so good that livestock would need no fodder during the winter. The temperature never dropped below freezing, and the grass only withered very slightly. The days and nights were much more equal in length than in Greenland or Iceland. In the depths of winter, the sun was aloft by mid-morning and still visible at mid-afternoon. When they had finished building their houses, Leif spoke to his companions. I want to divide our company into 2 groups, as I wish to explore. Let me get back to the page here. The land. One half is to remain at home by the longhouses, while the other half explores the land. They are never to go any farther than will enable them to return that same evening, and no one is to separate from the group. This they did for some time. Leif accompanied them sometimes, and other times remained at home by the houses. Leif was a large, strong man, of very striking appearance, and wise, as well as being a man of moderation in all things. End of chapter 2. Now, while I was reading, there was a little footnote here that I will read because I think it is fairly interesting. This sentence has been the subject of in depths of winter the sun was aloft by mid-morning and still visible at mid-afternoon. This sentence has been the subject of no small amount of speculation, for instance, equating Iktarstaður with the point of nonens and Dagmálastaður as the point of late morning, in an attempt to fix a location for Vinland, which has been to little real avail, as the meaning of these obsolete terms of reference is impossible to interpret with any certainty. Interesting discussions on this and many other aspects on the Vinland voyages are raised by Gwyn Jones in the North Atlantic Saga, Paul Bergthorsson in the Wineland Millennium, and Anna Yates in Leifur Eiriksson and Vinland the Good. Now, Nones is a time during the Liturgy of the Hours. I forget what time exactly, but if for all of those of the Catholic faith, Nones is a time of day. Well, not time of day, but liturgical time. The 9th hour of the day. About 3 p.m. In addition to the morning and evening prayer to accompany the sacrifice, not in the sense of like too long of an explanation, there was prayer at 3rd, 6th, and 9th hours of the day. Okay. Does anyone have any comments, questions about chapter 2? Don't be afraid to say anything. I'm looking at chat. I'm watching chat. Do not worry. I'm not going to yell at you. Ignore that. Chapter 3. One evening, it happened that one man, the southerner, Tyrkir, was missing from their company. Leif was very upset by this, as Tyrkir had spent many years with him and his father and had treated Leif as a child very affectionately. Leif criticized his companions harshly and prepared to search for Tyrkir, taking 12 men with him. When they had gone only a short way away from the houses, however, Tyrkir came towards them, and they welcomed him gladly. When they had, Leif soon realized that the companion of his childhood was pleased about something. Tyrkir had a protruding forehead and darting eyes, with dark wrinkles in his face. He was short in stature and frail-looking, but a master of all types of crafts. Leif then asked him, "Why were you so late returning, foster father? And how did you become separated from the rest?" For a long time, Tyrkir only spoke in German, with his eyes darting in all directions and his face contorted. The others understood nothing of what he was saying. After a while, he spoke in Norse. "I had gone only a bit farther than the rest of you, but I have news to tell you. I found grapevines and grapes." "Are you really sure of this, foster father?" Leif said. "I'm absolutely sure," he replied, "because where I was born, there was no lack of grapevines and grapes." They went to sleep after that, and the following morning Leif spoke to his crew. "We'll divide our time between 2 tasks, taking 1 day for one task and 1 day for the other, picking grapes or cutting vines, and felling the trees to make a load for my ship." They agreed on this course. Now there is a footnote. Let's read it. As philologist Olaf Halldórsson points out, it is conceivable that references here and elsewhere to cutting grapevines, vínviður, could be a result of a copying error or misunderstanding, and that vínber and vínviður, grapes and grapevines, the text should be read vínber and víður. Grapes, literally wineberries, and wood. The latter would be much more understandable as a valuable product worth transporting home to treeless Greenland. It could also be original, reflecting the general unfamiliarity of northerners with grapes and vines and supporting suggestions that the wine berries of Vinland grew on trees. It is said that the boat, which was drawn behind the ship, was filled with grapes. Then they cut a load for the ship. When spring came, they made a ship ready and set sail. Leif named the land for its natural features and called it Vinland, Wineland. Now, Vinland, according to the map in the book that I'm reading, Vinland is around what is modern day Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, Prince Edward Island, and the Gaspé Peninsula of Quebec in Canada, and then northern Maine in the United States. At least as far as I can see. Yes. Brattahlid is on the settlement mentioned earlier. That's on the very southern tip of Greenland. Anyways, back to the saga. They headed out to sea and had most favorable winds, until they came in sight of Greenland and the mountains under its glaciers. Then one of the crew spoke up, asking, "Why do you steer a course so close to the wind?" Leif answered, "I'm watching my course, but there's more to it than that. Do you see anything of note?" The crew said they did not. They saw nothing worthy of note. "I'm not sure," Leif said, "whether it's a ship or a skerry that I see." What is a skerry? I do not know this word. Let me go to the what do they call it? The dictionary. Skerry. A small rocky reef, or island. Oh, sker. Okay. That's what it is. That's sker in Old Norse. S-K-E-R. Then they saw it, and they said it was a skerry. Leif saw so much better than they did, that he could make out men on the skerry. "I want to steer us close into the wind," Leif said, "so that we can reach them. If these men should be in need of our help, then we shall try. We have to try and give it to them. If they should prove to be hostile, we have all the advantages on our side, and they have none." They managed to sail close to the skerry and lowered their sail, cast anchor, and put out one of the 2 extra boats they had taken with them. Leif then asked who was in charge of the company. The man who replied said his name was Thorir, and that he was of Norwegian origin. "And what is your name?" Leif told him his name. "Are you the son of Eirik the Red of Brattahlid?" he asked. Leif said yes, he was. Now, excuse me. "Now, I want to invite all of you," Leif said, "to come on board my ship, bringing as much of your valuables as the ship can carry." After they had accepted his offer, the ship sailed to Eiriksfjord with the cargo until they reached Brattahlid, where they unloaded the ship. Leif then invited Thorir to spend the winter with him there, along with Thorir's wife Guðrid and 3 other men, and found places for the other members of both his own and Thorir's crew. Leif then rescued 15 men from the skerry. After this, he was called Leif the Lucky. Leif now had become very wealthy and was held in much respect. That winter, Thorir's crew was stricken by illness, and he himself died. Rip. Along with most of his company, Eirik the Red also died that winter. There was great discussion of Leif's Vinland voyage, and his brother, Thorvald, felt that they had not explored enough of the land. Leif then said to Thorvald, "You go to Vinland, brother, and take my ship if you wish. But before you do so, I want the ship to make a trip to the Skerry to fetch the wood that Thorir had there. And so this was done. End of chapter 3. There are in total 8 chapters. So we're almost halfway there. Chapter 4. In consultation with his brother Leif, Thorvald now prepared for this journey with 30 companions. They made their ship ready and put out to sea, and nothing is told of their journey until they came to Vinland, to Leif's camp, where they laid up their ship and settled in for the winter, fishing for food. That spring, Thorvald said they should make their ship ready, and several men were to take the ship's boat and go to the west of the land and explore there during the summer. I need a drink. Hold on a second. There we go. Very refreshing. Where was I? Oh, yes. They thought the land fine and well forested, with wide beaches, and only a short distance between the forest and the sea. There were many islands and wide stretches of shallow sea. Nowhere did they see signs of men or animals. On one of the westerly islands they did find a wooden grain cover, but discovered no other work by human hands and headed back, returning to Leif's camp in the autumn. The second summer, Thorvald explored the country to the east on a large ship, going north around the land. They ran into stormy weather around one headland, and as they were driven ashore, smashing the keel of the ship. They stayed there a long time repairing their ship. Thorvald then said to his companions, I want us to raise the broken keel up on this point and call it Kjallarnes, Keel Point. This they did. Kjallarnes is, going back to the map, the very tippy top of Cape Breton Island in what is now modern-day Nova Scotia in Canada. They then left to sail to the east of the country and entered the mouths of the next fjords until they reached a cape stretching out seawards. It was covered with forest. After they secured their ship in a sheltered cove and pared out gangways towards the land, Thorvald and all his companions went ashore. He then spoke. This is an attractive spot, and here I would like to build my farm. And they headed back upon the ship and they saw 3 hillocks on the beach inland from the cape. Upon coming closer, they saw they were 3 hide-covered boats. There were 3 hide-covered boats with 3 men under each of them. They divided their forces and managed to capture all of them except one, who escaped with his boat. They killed the other 8 and went back to the cape. On surveying the area, they found a number of hillocks further up the fjord and assumed them to be settlements. Following this, they were stricken by sleep, so that they could no longer keep their eyes open, and all of them fell asleep. Then a voice was heard, calling, and they all woke up. Wake up, Thorvald, and all of your companions, the voice warned. If you wish to save your lives, get to the ship with all your men and leave this land as quickly as you can. A vast number of hide-covered boats came down the fjord, heading towards them. Thorvald then spoke. We will set up breastworks along the sides of the ship and defend ourselves well as possible, but fight back as little as we can. This they did, and after the natives had shot at them for a while, they fled as rapidly as they could. Thorvald then asked his men if they had been wounded, and they replied they were unhurt. I have been wounded under my arm, he said. An arrow flew between the edge of the ship and the shield into my armpit. Here's the arrow. This wound will cause my death. I now advise you to prepare for your return journey as quickly as possible, but take me to the cape that I thought was such a good farm site. Perhaps the words I spoke will prove true enough, and I will dwell there a while. You will bury me there and mark my grave with crosses at the head and foot, and call the spot Krossenes, Cross Point, after that. Krossenes is, according to the map, I'm going back to the map. Where was it? And the second tippy top point of the island of Nova Scotia, not Nova Scotia, of Cape Breton. Calanus is the top, like the highest, in terms of looking at the map, and then Crossenes is the one right next to it. Let us continue. Greenland had been converted to Christianity at the time, although Eirik the Red had died before the conversion. Yes, Eirik the Red I don't think was a Christian, but Leif Erikson was. Thorvald then died, and they did everything that he advised, and then left to meet with their other companions. Each group told its news to the other, and they spent the winter there loading the ships with grapes and grapevines. In the spring they made ready for the voyage back to Greenland. They steered the ship into Eiriksfjord, and had plenty of news to tell Leif. Chapter 5. Among the events taking place while in Greenland was the marriage of Thorstein Eiriksson to Guðrid Thorbjarnardóttir, who had previously been married to Thorir the Norwegian, who was spoken of earlier. Thorstein Eiriksson now wished to sail to Vinland to retrieve his brother Thorvald's body, and made the same ship ready once more. He selected his companions for strength and size, taking with him 25 men and his wife, Guðrid. Once they had made ready, they set sail and were out of sight of land. They were tossed about at sea all summer and did not know where they were. The first week of winter had passed when they made land in Lysefjord, in the western settlement of Greenland. Thorstein managed to find places for all of his crew members, but he and his wife had no accommodation and remained alone on the ship for several nights. In those days, Christianity was still in its infancy in Greenland. One day, some men came to their tent early in the day. The leader of the group asked what men were in the tent. Thorstein answered, "There are 2 of us," he said, "and who is asking?" "Thorstein is my name, and I am called Thorstein the Black. My reason for coming is to invite you and your wife to stay the winter with me." Thorstein Eiriksson had said he had wished to seek his wife's guidance, a mark of a good marriage, and when she told him to decide, he agreed to the offer. "Then I'll return with a team of oxen to fetch you tomorrow, as I do not lack the means to put you up. But it will be an unexciting stay, as there are only the 2 of us, my wife and myself, and I prefer my own company. Also, I have another faith than you, although I expect yours is the better of the 2. So I would assume that Thorstein the Black is a pagan. He then came with a team of oxen to fetch them the next day, and so they went to stay with Thorstein the Black, and he provided for them generously. Well, I mean, even in the faith of the old gods, in the Halvamal, there's a lot on hospitality, or in there's a German word for it, Gastfreundlichkeit, guest friendliness, hospitality, same thing. Guðrid was a woman of striking appearance and wise as well, who knew how to behave among strangers. It was early in the winter when the first of Thorstein Eiriksson's companions were stricken by illness, and many of them died there. Thorstein asked that the coffins be made for the bodies of those who had died, and that they be taken to the ship and secured away there. As when summer comes, I intend to take all the bodies back to Eiriksfjord. It was not long until the sickness came to Thorstein's house, and his wife, Grimhild, was the first of all ill. She was a very large woman, with the strength of a man, muscles, and yet she bowed to the illness. Soon after that, Thorstein Eiriksson was stricken, and both of them lay ill, until Grimhild, the wife of Thorstein the Black, died. And after she died, Thorstein the Black left the main room to seek a plank to place her body on. Guðrid then spoke. "Don't be away long, dear Thorstein," she said. He promised to do as she asked. Thorstein Eiriksson then spoke. "Strange are the actions of the mistress of the house now. She's struggling to raise herself up on her elbow, stretching her feet out from the bedboards and feeling for her shoes. At this, Thorstein the Black returned, and Grimhild collapsed that same instant, with a cracking sound coming from every timber in the room. Thorstein then made a coffin for Grimhild's body, and took it away and secured it. He was a large, strong man, and needed to call upon all his strength before he managed to remove his wife from the farm. Thorstein Eriksson's condition worsened, and then he died. His wife, Gudrid, was overtaken by grief. All of them were in the main room. Gudrid had been sitting on a stool in front of the bench where her husband, Thorstein, had lain. Thorstein the farmer then took Gudrid from her stool into his arms and sat with her on the bench across from her husband Thorstein's corpse, and said many encouraging things, consoling her and promising her that he would take her to Eiriksfjord with her husband Thorstein's body and those of his companions, and will invite other people to stay here, he said, to provide you with solace and companionship. Good guy. She thanked him. Thorstein Eriksson then sat up and spoke. Where is Gudrid? 3 times he spoke these words, and she remained silent. Then she spoke to Thorstein the farmer. Shall I answer his question, or not? He told her not to answer. Thorstein the farmer then crossed the floor and sat on the chair, and Gudrid on his knee. Then Thorstein the farmer spoke. What is it you want, namesake? He said. He answered after a short pause. I want to tell Gudrid her fate, to make it easier for her to resign herself to my death, for I have gone to a good resting place. I can tell you, Gudrid, that you will be married to an Icelander, and you will live a long life together, and have many descendants, promising, bright and fine, sweet and well scented. You will leave Greenland to go to Norway, and from there to Iceland, and set up house in Iceland. There you will live a long time, outliving your husband. You will travel abroad, go south on a pilgrimage, and return to Iceland to your farm, where a church will be built. There you will remain and take holy orders, become a nun, is what that means. Take holy orders, and there you will die. At that, Thorstein Eriksson fell back, and his corpse was made ready to be taken to the ship. Thorstein the farmer kept all of his promises to Gudrid faithfully. In the spring, he sold his farm and livestock and loaded all his possessions aboard the ship with Gudrid. He then made the ship ready and hired a crew and sailed to Eiriksfjord. The bodies were then buried in the churchyard. Gudrid went to stay with Leif at Brattahlid, and Thorstein the Black built a farm in Eiriksfjord, where he stayed as long as he lived, and was regarded as a most capable man. The same summer, a ship from Norway arrived in Greenland. The skipper of the ship was named Thorfinn Karlsefni. He was the son of Thord Horsehead, the son of Snorri Thordarson of Hofti. Thorfinn Karlsefni was a very wealthy man. He spent the winter with Leif Eriksson in Brattahlid. He was soon attracted by Gudrid and asked her to marry him, but she referred him to Leif for answer. She was then engaged to him, and their wedding took place that winter. The discussion of a voyage to Vinland continued as before, and people strongly urged Karlsefni to make the journey, Gudrid among them. Once he had decided to make the journey, he hired himself a crew of 60 men and 5 women. Karlsefni and his crew made an agreement that anything of value they obtained would be divided equally among them. They took all sorts of livestock with them, for they intended to settle in the country if they could. There we go. Karlsefni asked Leif for his houses in Vinland, and Leif said he would lend, but not give them to him. They then put out to sea in their ship, and arrived without mishap at Leif's booths. There we go. At Leif's booths, where they unloaded their sleeping sacks. They soon had plenty of good provisions, since a fine, large rorqual had stranded on the beach. After they had gone and carved up the whale, they had no lack of food. The livestock made its way inland, but the male animal soon became irritable and hard to handle. They had brought one bull with them. Karlsefni had trees felled and hewn to load aboard his ship, and had the timber piled on a large rock to dry. They had plenty of supplies from the natural bounty there, and they had plenty of supplies from, including grapes, all sorts of fish and game, and other good things. After the first winter passed and summer came, they became aware of the natives. A large group of men came out of the woods close to where the cattle were pastured. The bull began bellowing and snorting very loudly. This frightened the natives, who ran off with their burdens, which included their fur pelts and sables and all kinds of skins. They headed for Karlsefni's farm and tried to get into the house, but Karlsefni had the door defended. Neither group could understand the language of the other. The natives then set down their packs and opened them, offering them goods, preferably in exchange for weapons, but Karlsefni forbade the men to trade weapons. He sought a solution by having the women bring out milk and milk products. Once they saw these products, the native wished to purchase them and nothing else. This trading with the natives resulted in them bearing off the purchases in their stomachs, leaving the packs and skins with Karlsefni and his companions. This done, they departed. Karlsefni had built a sturdy palisade around his farm, where they prepared to defend themselves. At this time, Gudrid, Karlsefni's wife, gave birth to a boy, who was named Snorri. Near the beginning of their second winter, the natives visited them again, in much greater numbers than before, and with the same goods as before. Karlsefni then spoke to the women, bring out whatever food was most in demand last time, and nothing else. When the natives saw this, they threw their packs in over the palisade. Gudrid sat inside in the doorway, with the cradle of her son Snorri. A shadow fell across the doorway, and a woman entered, rather short in stature, wearing a close-fitting tunic, with a shawl over her head and light red-brown hair. She was pale, and had eyes so large that the eyes of such size had never been seen in a human head. So an anime character. She came to where Gudrid was sitting and spoke. "What is your name?" she said. "My name is Gudrid. And what is yours?" "My name is Gudrid," the other woman said. Gudrid, Karlsefni's wife, then motioned to her with her hand to sit down beside her. But just as she did so, a great crash was heard, and the woman disappeared. At that moment, one of the natives had been killed by one of Karlsefni's servants for trying to take weapons from them, and they quickly ran off, leaving their clothes and trade goods lying behind. No one but Gudrid had seen the woman. "We have to decide on a plan," said Karlsefni, "since I expect they will return for a third time, hostile and in greater numbers. We'll follow this plan. 10 men will go out to the headland and let themselves be seen there, while the rest of us go into the forest and cut a clearing for our cattle. When approaching from the forest we will take our bull and let him head our group into battle." Bull cavalry, I guess. In the place where they planned to take them on, there was water on one side and a forest on the other. They followed the proposal Karlsefni had made. The natives soon came to the place Karlsefni had intended for battle. They fought, and a large number of the Skrælingjar were killed. Skrælingjar was the Old Norse term for the natives. The natives were killed. One of the men in the natives' group was tall and handsome, and Karlsefni thought him likely to be their leader. One of the natives picked up an axe, peered at it a while, and then aimed at one of his companions and struck him. The other fellow was killed outright. The tall man then picked up the axe, examined it a while, and threw it as far out into the sea as he could. After that, the natives fled into the woods at top speed, and they had no more dealings with them. Karlsefni and his companions spent the entire winter there, but in the spring he declared that he wished to remain no longer and wanted to return to Greenland. They made ready for their journey, taking with them plenty of the land's products: grapevines, berries, and skins. They set sail and arrived safely in Eirik, where they stayed over the winter. Chapter 7. Discussions soon began of a Vinland voyage, again, since the trip seemed to bring men both wealth and renown. The same summer that Karlsefni returned from Vinland, a ship arrived in Greenland from Norway. The skippers were two brothers, Helgi and Finnbogi, who spent the winter in Greenland. They were Icelanders from the East Fjords. We now turn to Freydis Eiriksdottir, who set out on a journey from Gardar to meet with the two brothers, Helgi and Finnbogi, and to propose that they may all make the journey to Vinland on their ship and have a half share of any profits from it. This they agreed. From there, she went to her brother Leif and asked him to give her the houses he had built in Vinland. He replied, as he had before, that he would lend the houses but not give them to anyone. And according to the agreement between Freydis and the two brothers, they each were to have about 30 fighting men aboard his ship and women in addition. Freydis broke the agreement straight away, however, and took 5 extra men, concealing them so that the brothers were not aware of them until they had reached Vinland. They put to sea, having agreed beforehand to try to stick together if possible on the way, and they almost managed this. The brothers arrived slightly earlier, however, and unloaded their ship and carried their belongings to Leif's houses when Freydis arrived. Her group unloaded the ship and carried its belongings to the houses. Freydis then said, "Why did you put your belongings here?" "We thought," they answered, "that you intended to keep your word to us." "Leif lent me the houses," she said, "not you." Helgi then spoke, "We brothers will never be a match for your ill will." They removed their things and built themselves a longhouse farther from the sea, on the bank of a lake, and settled in well. Freydis had wood cut to make a load for her ship. When winter came, the brothers suggested that they hold games and arrange entertainment. This went on for a while, until disagreements arose. The ill feelings split the party so that the games ceased and each group kept to its own houses. This continued for much of the winter. Early one morning, Freydis got up and dressed, but did not put on any footwear. English. The weather had left a thick dew on the grass. She took her husband's cape and placed it over her shoulders and went to the brothers' longhouse and came to the doorway. A man had gone out a short while earlier and left the door half open. She opened the door and stood silently in the doorway a while. Finnbogi lay awake at the inner end of the house. He spoke. "What do you want here, Freydis?" She answered, "I want you to get up and come outside. I have to speak to you." He did as she said. They went over to a tree trunk lying near the wall of the house and sat there. "How do you like it here?" she asked. "I think the land has much to offer, but I don't like the ill feeling between us, as I don't think there's reason for it." "What you say is true," she said, "and I agree. But my purpose in coming to see you was that I want to exchange ships with the two of you, as you have a larger ship than I do, and I want to leave this place." "I suppose I can agree to that," he said, "if that will please you." After this, they parted. She returned home, and Finnbogi went back to his bed. When she climbed back into her bed, her cold feet woke Thorvard, and who asked why she was so cold and wet. She answered vehemently, "I went to the brothers to ask to purchase their ship, as I wanted a larger ship. They reacted so angrily, they struck me and treated me very badly, but you're such a coward that you will repay neither dishonor done to me nor to yourself. I am now paying the price of being this so far from my home in Greenland, and unless you avenge this, I will divorce you." Not being able to ignore her upbraiding any longer, he told the men to get up as quickly as they could and arm themselves. Having done so, they went at once to the long house of the brothers, entered while those inside were still asleep, and took them, tied them up, and once bound, led them outside. Freydis, however, had each one of the men who was brought out killed. A very, very dramatic turn of events. Soon all the men had been killed, and only the women were left, so no one would kill them, as no one would kill them. Freydis then spoke. "Hand me an axe." This was done, and then she attacked the 5 women and killed them all. They returned to their house after this wicked deed, and it was clear that Freydis was highly pleased with what she had accomplished. She spoke to her companions. If we are fortunate enough to make it back to Greenland, she said, I will have anyone who tells of these events killed. We will say that remained behind here when we took our leave. Early in the spring, they loaded the ship, which the brothers had owned, with all the produce that they could gather and the ship would hold. They then set sail and had a good voyage, sailing their ship into Eirik in the early summer. Karlsefni was there already, with his ship all set to sail and only waiting for a favourable wind. It was said that no ship sailing from Greenland had been loaded with a more valuable cargo than the one he commanded. Chapter 8, Final Chapter. Freydis returned to her farm and livestock, which had not suffered from her absence. She made sure all her companions were well rewarded, since she wished to have her misdeeds concealed. She stayed on her farm after that. Not everyone was so close-mouthed that they could keep silent about these misdeeds or wickedness, and eventually word got out. In time it reached the ears of Leif, her brother, who thought the story a terrible one. Leif then took 3 men from Freydis' company and forced them all under torture to tell the truth about the events, and their accounts agreed in every detail. I am not the one to deal my sister Freydis the punishment she deserves, Leif said, but I predict that their descendants will not get on well in this world. As things turned out, after that, no one expected anything but evil from them. To return to Karlsefni, he made his ship and ready and set sail. They had a good passage and made land in Norway safely. He remained there over the winter, sold his goods, and both he and his wife were treated lavishly by the leading men in Norway. The following spring, he made his ship ready to sail to Iceland. When he was ready to sail and the ship lay at the landing stage awaiting a favorable wind, he was approached by a southerner from Bremen in Saxony. He asked Karlsefni to sell him the carved declaration on the prow. There's a footnote here. The Icelandic word húsasnotra could refer not to a decoration, but to a kind of astrolabe. I don't care to sell it, he replied. I'll give you half a mark of gold for it. The southerner said. Karlsefni thought this was a good offer, and the purchase was concluded. The southerner then took the decoration and departed. Karlsefni did not know what wood it was made, but it was made of maple. Footnote. The Icelandic word mösir could also refer to burl or burley wood, which had been brought from Vinland. Karlsefni then put to sea and made land in North Iceland, in Skagafjord, where he had his ship drawn ashore for the winter. In the spring, he purchased the land at Glaumbeir and established his farm there. Where he had lived for the remainder of his days. He was the most respected of men. He and his wife, Gudrid, had a great number of descendants, and a fine clan they were. After Karlsefni's death, Gudrid took over the running of the household, together with her son Snorri, who had been born in Vinland. When Snorri married, Gudrid travelled abroad, made a pilgrimage south, and returned to her son Snorri's farm. By then, he had a church built at Glaumbeir. Later, Gudrid became a nun and anchoress, staying there for the remainder of her life. Snorri had a son named Thorgeir, who was the father of Ingveld, the mother of Bishop Brand. Snorri Karlsefni's son, daughter Halfrid, was the wife of Runolf, the father of Bishop Thorlak. Thorlak is an Icelandic saint, Saint Thorlak of Iceland. If this is the same person that I'm thinking of, I would believe so, seeing the chronological storyline develop. Bjorn, another son of Karlsefni and Gudrid, was the father of Thorun, the mother of Bishop Bjorn. There are a great number of people descended from Karlsefni who founded a prosperous clan. It was Karlsefni who gave the most extensive reports of anyone in all of these voyages. some of which have now been set down in writing. And that is the end of the Saga of the Greenlanders. A very interesting tale about the discovery of North America by the great navigators of the Scandinavian world. Now, Eirik the Red Saga is a bit longer. It's about 12 chapters. Hey, thank you for the who followed. If you followed, put your name in chat so I can thank you. I can't quite see it. So, please let me know. So I'm going to see if I can do a poll. Can I? How do I do a poll in the Twitch chat? I closed out chat. Never mind. Let me open that back up. There we go. So, thank you, whoever followed. Just know that you have my gratitude. I can't see your name, but tack för. Thank you. Would y'all like me to continue reading the Saga of Eirik the Red, or do you want me to do something else? It's 12 chapters. So please, if you can, put in chat a yes or a no, or a Y or an N or something like that, just so I can get a general idea. Otherwise, if you want to ask questions about the saga, more than welcome to ask. You should do whatever you prefer, but I'd love to hear you keep reading. Thank you, Queenly Arts. Okay. So that's one yes. Does anyone have any objections? If there's no objections, I'll continue reading. The Saga of Eirik the Red, or Eirik Röð's Saga in Icelandic, in Old Norse. I'll put the Icelandic or Old Norse name in the chat. Icelandic hasn't changed much from Old Norse, so there you go. Eirik Saga Röða, the Saga of Eirik the Red. This would take place around, if you want specifics, 970. The entirety of these two sagas, the Saga of the Greenlanders and the Eirik the Red Saga, take place around 970 to 1030 AD. It was written down in 1220, so about 200 years. 200 years later, somewhere like that, at the beginning, but finished being written down in 1280. Interesting stuff. These were genuine historical events. There was a warrior king named Olaf, who was called Olaf the White. He was the son of King Ingjald, who was the son of Helgi, who was the son of Olaf, who was the son of Guðr, who was the son of Halfdan Whiteleg, king of the people of Uppland, which is in modern-day Norway. Olaf went on Viking expeditions around Britain, conquering the Shire of Dublin in Ireland, where he declared himself king. As his wife, he took Auth the Deep-Minded, the daughter of Ketil Flatnose, son of Bjorn Buna, an excellent man from Norway. Their son was named Thorstein the Red. After Olaf was killed in battle in Irland, in Ireland, Auth and Thorstein went to the Hebrides. There, Thorstein married Thurid, the daughter of Eyvind the Easterner and sister of Helgi the Lean. They had a large number of children. Thorstein became a powerful warrior king, throwing his lot with Earl Sigurd the Powerful, the son of Eystein Glumra. They conquered Caithness and Sutherland, Ross and Moray, and more than half of Scotland. Thorstein became king until the Scots betrayed him, and he was killed in battle. Rip. Oidd was at Caithness when she learned of the death of Thorstein. She had a Nor built secretly in the forest, and when it was finished, set out for the Orkneys. There she arranged for the marriage of Groa, Thorstein the Red's daughter. Groa was the mother of Gwelod, who was married to Earl Thorfinn the Skull Splitter. Imagine having that attached to your name. Frithjof the Skull Splitter. Hey, that sounds pretty nice. I'll roll with that. After this, Oidd set out for Iceland. On her ship, she had a crew of 20 free-born men. Now Oidd reached Iceland and spent the first winter in Bjarnarhofn with her brother Björn. Fun fact, in the modern Scandinavian languages, Björn means bear. Afterwards, Oidd claimed all the land in the dales between Dagfjörðara and Skramhlopsa, and those were 2 rivers, by the way, and settled at Kvam. She used to pray on the Krossholar hill, where she had crosses erected, for she was baptized and a devout Christian. Accompanying her on her journey to Iceland were many men of good family who had been taken prisoner by Vikings raiding around Britain and were called bondsmen. They were bonds. Not James Bond, but a bondsman. One of them was named Fifil. He was a man of very good family who had been taken prisoner in Britain and was called a bondsman until Oidd gave him his freedom. Good job! When Oidd gave her crew farm sites, Fifil asked her why she had not given him land like the others. Oidd replied that it made no difference whether he owned land or not. He would be considered just as fine a man wherever he was. Good compliment. Oidd gave him Vífilsdal, and he settled there. He had a wife and 2 sons, Thorgir and Thorbjorn. They were promising men and grew up with their father. Chapter 2. There was a man named Thorvald, the son of Asvald Ulfsson, son of Oxthorir. His son was named Eirik the Red. Titular character. Father and son left Jæren, and sailed to Iceland because they had been involved in slayings. They claimed land on the coast of Hornstrandir and sailed at Drangar. There, Thorvald died. Unfortunate. As his wife Eirik took Thjothild, the daughter of Jorund Atlason, her mother, Thorbjörg Shipbreast, was married to Thorbjorn of Haukadal then. Eirik then moved south, cleared land in Haukadal, and built a farm at Eiriksstaðir by Vatnshorn. Eirik's slaves then caused a landslide to fall on the farm of Valthjof at Valthjofstaðir. His kinsman Filth-Eyjolf killed the slaves near Skeiðbrekkur above Vatnshorn. For this, Eirik slew Filth-Eyjolf. He also killed Hrafn the Dueler at Leikskallar. Geirstein and Odd of Jorvi, Eirik's kinsman, sought redress for his killing. They wanted revenge. Let's see if they get it. After this, Eirik was outlawed from Haukadal. He was, in Norse culture, this is being declared a Nidingar, or a nothing, like outlaw, a bandit, a brigand, or whatever you want to call it, just generally a persona non grata, if you were to use Latin. He claimed the islands Broki and Oxney and farmed at Traðir in Suðurey Island for the first winter. It was then Eirik led Thorgest's bedstead boards. Later he moved to Oxney, where he farmed at Eiríksstaðir. He then asked for the bedstead boards back without success. Eirik then went to Breiðabólstad and took the boards, and Thorgest came after him. They fought not far from the farm at Drangar, where 2 of Thorgest's sons were killed, along with several other men. After that, both of them kept a large following. Eirik had the support of Styr and Eyjolf of Sviney, Thorbrand Vífilsson, and the sons of Thorbrand of Alftafjord, while Thord Bellower and Thorgeir of Hítardal, Aslak of Langadal, and his son Illugi gave their support to Thorgest. Eirik and his companions were sentenced to outlawry at the Thorgnes assembly, the Althing. The Althing was kind of this giant get-together, this parliament of sorts, where they would vote on legal cases. This law speaker of the Althing had to memorize all of the laws that were ever in existence, because they didn't write them down. Imagine having to do that. I probably couldn't. Maybe. Who knows? We have writing. He made his ship ready in Eiriksvåg, and Eyjolf hid him in Dimonavåg, while Thorgest and his men searched the islands for him. Thorbjorn, Eyjolf, and Styr accompanied Eirik through the islands. Eirik said that he intended to seek out the land that Gunnbjorn, the son of Ulf Crow, had seen when he was driven off course westward and discovered Gunnbjornskeri. If he found the land, he promised to return to his friends, and they parted with great warmth. Is the sound alright for the campfire? If you can hear it, or if not, let me know. Because there's supposed to be more background sound. I'll see if you text anything in chat, people. Anyways. If he found the land, he promised to return to his friends, and they parted with great warmth. Eirik promised to support them in any way he could, if they should need his help. Eirik sailed seaward from Snæfellsnes, and approached land in Greenland under the glacier called Kvitserk, White Shift. From there he sailed southwards, seeking suitable land for settlement. He spent the first winter on Eiriksey Island, near the middle of the eastern settlements. The eastern settlement is in the southwest of Greenland. The following spring he travelled to Eiriksfjord, where he settled. That summer he travelled around the then uninhabited western settlement, giving names to a number of sites. The second winter he spent in Eiriksholmar near Kvartskidna. The third summer he sailed as far north as Snæfell into Ravensfjord. That's a very cool name. There he thought that he had reached the head of Eiriksfjord. He then returned to spend the third winter in Eiriksey, at the mouth of Eiriksfjord. The following summer he sailed to Iceland and made land at Breiðafjord. He spent the winter with Ingolf at Holmlatr. The following spring he fought with Thorgest and lost, after which they made their peace. In the summer, Eirik left to settle the country which he had found, which he called Greenland. As he said, people would be attracted there if it had a favourable name. So, moral of the story so far, Eirik the Red did a little prank. He did a little bit of a trolling. And said, we are going to call this Greenland so that people will move here. People did. Chapter 3. Thorgeir Vífilsson took his wife Arnora, the daughter of Einar of Laugarbrekka. the son of Sigmund, the son of Ketil Thistle, who had claimed land in Thistlefjord. Einar had another daughter named Halveig. She was married to Thorvern Bifilsson and was given land at Laugarbrekka at Hellithvellir. Thorvern moved his household there and became a man of great worth. He ran a prosperous farm and lived in grand style. Gudrith was the name of Thorbjorn's daughter. She was the most attractive of women and one to be reckoned with in all her dealings. A man named Orm had farmed at Arnarstapi. His wife was named Halldís. Orm was a good farmer, and a great friend of Thorbjorn's. The couple fostered Gudrith, who spent long periods of time there. A man named Thorgir farmed at Þorgeirsfell. He was very rich in livestock and was a freed slave. He had a son named Einar. Hey, that's my dad's name. A handsome and capable man with a liking for fine dress. Einar went on trading voyages abroad, at which he was quite successful, and he usually spent winters in Iceland and Norway by turn. It is said that one autumn when Einar was in Iceland, he travelled with his goods out to the Snæfellsnes Peninsula, intending to sell them. He came to Arnarstapi and Orm invited him to stay with them, which Einar accepted as friendship was included in the bargain. Hey, he made a friend. Congratulations. Einar's goods were placed in a shed. He took them out to show Orm to Orm and his household, and asked Orm to choose as much as he wished for himself. Orm accepted and praised Einar as both a merchant of good repute, and a man of great fortune. There we go. While they were occupied with goods, a woman passed in front of the shed doorway. Einar asked Orm who this beautiful woman was who had passed in front of the doorway. I hadn't seen her here before. Orm said, "That is Gudrid, my foster daughter, the daughter of the farmer Thorbjorn of Laugarbrekka." Einar spoke. "She'd make a fine match. Or has anyone already turned up to ask for her hand?" Orm answered, "She's been asked for right enough, my friend. But it's no easy prize. As it turns out, she is choosy about her husband, and as is her father as well." "Be that as it may," Einar spoke, "she's the woman I intend to propose to, and I would like you to put my proposal to her father. And if you do your best to support my suit, I will pay you with the truest of friendship." Farmer Thorbjorn should see that we'd be well connected, as he's a man of high repute and has a good farm, but I'm told his means have been much depleted. My father and I lack neither land nor means, so we'd be a considerable support to Thorbjorn if the match were concluded. Orm answered, though I think of myself as your friend, I'm not eager to breach the question with him, for Thorbjorn is prone to take offence, and a man with no small sense of his own worth." Einar replied that he would not be satisfied unless the proposal was made, and Orm said he would have it his way. Burger King. Einar headed south once more until he arrived back home. Some time later, Thorbjorn held an autumn feast, as was his custom, for he lived in high style. Orm from Arnarstapi attended, and many other friends of Thorbjorn's. Orm managed to speak privately to Thorbjorn and told him of the recent visit by Einar of Þorgeirsfell, who was becoming a man of promise. Orm then put Einar's proposal to Thorbjorn and said it would be suitable on a number of accounts. It would be a considerable support to you as far as money is concerned. Thorbjorn answered, "I never expected to hear such words from you, telling me to marry my daughter to the son of a slave, as you suggest now, since you think I'm running short of money. She'll not go back with you, since you think her worthy of such a lowly match." Orm then returned home, and all the other guests went to their homes. Gudr stayed behind with her father and spent that winter at home. When spring came, Thorbiorn invited some friends to a feast. The provisions were plentiful, and it was attended by many people who enjoyed the finest of feasts. During the feasting, Thorbiorn called for silence, and then spoke. Here I have lived a life of some length. I have enjoyed the kindness and warmth of others, and to my mind our dealings have gone well. My financial situation, however, which has not been up which has been not up to now been considered an unworthy one, is on the decline, so I'd rather leave my farm than live with this loss of honour. I'd rather leave the country than shame my family. I intend to take up the offer made to me by my friend Eirik the Red, where he took his leave of me in Breiðafjörð. I intend to head for Greenland this summer if things go as I wish. These plans got a great stir as Thorbiorn had long been popular, but it was generally felt that once he had spoken in this way, there would be little point in trying to dissuade him. Thorbiorn gave people gifts, and the feast came to an end after this, with everyone returning to their homes. Thorbiorn sold his lands and bought a ship which had been beached at the Hrothafnaros estuary. 30 men accompanied him on his voyage. Among them were Orm of Arnarstapi and his wife, and other friends of Thorbiorn's who did not want to part with him. After this, they set sail, but the weather, which had been favourable when they set out, changed. The favourable wind dropped, and they were beset by storms, so that they made little progress during the summer. Following this, illness plagued their company, and Orm and his wife and half the company died. The sea swelled, and their boat took on much water, but despite many other hardships, they made land in Greenland at Helljofsnes during the winter nights. At Helljofsnes lived a man named Thorkel, who was a great capable man and the best of farmers. He gave Thorbiorn and all of his companions shelter for the winter, treating them generously. Thorbiorn and all of his companions were highly pleased. Chapter 4. This was a very lean time in Greenland. Those who had gone hunting had poor catches, and some of them had failed to return. In the district there lived a woman named Thorbjörg, a seeress who was called the Little Prophetess. She was the one of 10 sisters, all of whom had the gift of prophecy, and was the only one of them still alive. It was Thorbjörg's custom to spend the winter visiting one after another farms to which she had been invited, mostly by people curious to learn of their own future or what was in store for the coming year. Since Thorkel was the leading farmer there, people felt it was up to him to try and find out when the hard times which had been oppressing them would let up. Thorkel invited the seeress to visit, and preparations were made to entertain her well, as was the custom of the time when a woman of this type was received. A high seat was set for her, complete with cushion. This was to be stuffed with chicken feathers. When she arrived one evening, along with the man who had been sent to fetch her, she was wearing a black mantle with a strap, which was adorned with precious stones right down to the hem. About her neck she wore a string of glass beads, and on her head a hood of black lambskin lined with white catskin. She bore a staff with a knob on the top, adorned with brass set with stones on top. About her waist she had a linked charm belt with a large purse. In it she kept the charms which she needed for her predictions. She wore calfskin boots lined with fur, with long sturdy laces and large pewter knobs at the ends. On her hands she wore gloves of catskin, white and lined with fur. When she entered, everyone was supposed to offer her respectful greetings, and she responded according to how the person appealed to her. Farmer Thorkel took the wise woman by the hand and led her to the seat which had been prepared for her. He then asked her to survey his flock, servants, and buildings. She had little to say about all of it. That evening tables were set up and food prepared for the seeress. A porridge of kid's milk was made for her, and as meat which she was given the hearts of all the animals available there. She had a spoon of brass and a knife of an ivory shaft, its 2 halves clasped with bronze bands, and the point of which had been broken off. Once the tables had been cleared away, Thorkel approached Thorbjörg and asked what she thought of the house. and the conduct of the household, and how soon he could expect an answer to what he had asked, and everyone wished to know. She answered that she would not reveal this until the next day, after having spent the night there. Late the following day, she was provided with things she required to carry out her magic rites. She asked for the women who knew the chants required for carrying out magic rites, which are called ward songs. Here's a footnote. Literally, ward enticers, varlokker. Chants likely to have been intended to attract the spirits to the sorceress, who was enclosed in a ring of wards as described below. But such women were not to be found. Then the people of the household were asked if there was anyone with such knowledge. Gudrid answered, I have neither magical powers nor the gift of prophecy, but in Iceland my foster mother, Halldís, taught me chants she called ward songs. Thorbjörg answered, Then you know more than I expected. Gudrid said, These are the sort of actions which I intend to take no part. I am a Christian woman. Thorbjörg answered, It could be that you help the people here by so doing, and you'd be no worse a woman for that. But I expect Thorkel to provide me for what I need. Thorkel then urged Gudrid, who said that she would do as he wished. The women formed a warding ring around the platform raised for sorcery, and with Thorbjörg perched atop it. Gudrid spoke the chant so well and so beautifully that people there they said they had never heard anyone recite in a fairer voice. The seeress thanked her for her chant. She said that many spirits had been attracted who thought the chant fair to hear, though earlier they wished to turn their backs on us and refused to do our bidding. Many things are now clear to me which had earlier concealed from both me and others. And I can tell you that the spell of hardship will last no longer, and times will improve as spring advances. The bout of illness which has long plagued you will also improve sooner than you expect. And you, Gudrid, I will reward on the spot for the help we have received, since your fate is now very clear to me. You will make the most honourable of matches here in Greenland, though you won't be putting down roots here, as your path leads to Iceland, and from you will be descended a long and worthy line. Over all the branches of that family a bright ray shall shine. May you fare well now, my child. After that, people approached the wise woman to learn what each of them was most curious to know. She made them good answer, and little that she predicted did not occur. I believe I skipped a page. No. Following this, an escort arrived from another farm, and the seeress departed. Thorbjorn was also sent for, as he refused to remain at home on the farm while such heathen practices were going on. With the arrival of spring, the weather soon improved, as Thorbjörg had predicted. Thorbjorn made his ship ready and sailed until he reached Brattahlid. Eirik received him with open arms and declared how good it was that he would come. He had come. Thorbjorn and his family spent the winter with him. The following spring, Eirik gave Thorbjorn land at Stokkanes, where he built an impressive farmhouse and lived from then on. Chapter 5. Eirik had a wife named Thjodhild, and two sons, Thorstein and Leif. Leif Eiriksson. Both of them were promising young men. Thorstein lived at home with his father, and there was no man in Greenland who was considered as handsome as he. Leif had sailed to Norway, where he was one of King Olaf Tryggvason's men. But when Leif had sailed from Greenland that summer, the ship was driven off course to land in the Hebrides. From there, they failed to get a favorable wind, and he had to stay in the islands for much of the summer. Leif fell in love with a woman named Thorgunna. She was of very good family, and Leif realized that she knew a thing or two. Maybe she's seen a thing or two. When Leif was leaving, Thorgunna asked to go with him. Leif asked whether her kinsmen were of any mind to agree to this, and she declared that she did not care. She said, don't care, didn't ask. Leif said he was reluctant to abduct a woman of such high birth from a foreign country. There are so few of us. Thorgunna spoke. I'm not sure you'll like the alternative better. I'll take my chances on that, Leif said. Then I will tell you, Thorgunna said, that I am with child, and that this child is yours. It's my guess that I will give birth to a boy in due course, and even though you ignore him, I will raise the boy and send him to you in Greenland as soon as he is of an age to travel with others. But it's my guess that he will serve you as well as you have served me with your departure. I intend to come to Greenland myself before it's all over. He gave her a gold ring, a Greenland cape, and a belt of ivory. The boy, who was named Thorgils, did come to Greenland, and Leif recognized him as his son. Some men say that this Thorgils came to Iceland before the hauntings at Froda in the summer. The hauntings of Froda. This story is told as the Saga of the people of Eirik. Maybe I'll read that next time. Thorgils stayed in Greenland after that, and before it was all over, he was also thought to have something preternatural about him. Leif and his men left the Hebrides and made land in Norway in the autumn. Leif became one of the king's men, and King Olaf Tryggvason of Norway showed him much honor, as Leif appeared to him to be a man of good breeding. That means he had good genes. It does not surprise me. On one occasion, the king spoke to Leif privately and said, "Do you intend to sail to Greenland this summer?" Leif answered, "I would like to do so, if it is your wish." The king answered, It could well be so. You will go as my envoy and convert Greenland to Christianity." Leif said that the king should decide that, but added that he feared this message would meet with a harsh reception in Greenland. The king said he saw no man more suitable for the job than Leif, and he'll have the good fortune that's needed. "If that's so," Leif declared, "then only because I enjoy yours as well." Once he had made ready, Leif set sail. After being tossed at sea for a long time, he chanced upon land which he had not expected any to be found. Fields of self-sown wheat and vines were growing there. Also, there were trees known as maple, and they took specimens of all of them. Leif also chanced upon men clinging to a ship's wreck, whom he brought home and found shelter of the winter. In doing so, he showed his strong character and kindness. He converted the country to Christianity. Afterwards, he became known as Leif the Lucky. Now, if y'all remember from the Saga of the Greenlanders, there was those people that were stranded on the Sker, on the Skerry. So that takes place immediately after this. Very interesting. Where was that again? Chapter, for my own cross-referencing. The end of chapter 3 of the Saga of the Greenlanders. So, he converted them to Christianity. Leif said the king. Oh wait, he already read this. Leif made land in Eiriksfjord and went home to the farm at Brattahlid. There he was received warmly. He soon began to advocate Christianity and the true Catholic faith throughout the country, revealing the messages of King Olaf Tryggvason to the people, and telling them how excellent and glorious this faith was. Eirik was reluctant to give up his faith, but Theodhild was quick to convert and had a church built a fair distance from the house. It was called Theodhild's Church, and there she prayed, along with those other people who converted into Christianity, among whom there were many. After her conversion, Theodhild refused to sleep with Eirik, much to his displeasure. Okay, a very interesting detail. Oh well. No sex. The suggestion that men go out to seek out the land which Leif had found soon gained wide support. The leading proponent was Eirik's son Thorstein. Wait, hold on, I missed a footnote. He converted the country to Christianity. This sentence, or even the whole paragraph, appears to be misplaced. Presumably, the country refers to Greenland. Oh well. The suggestion that men go out to seek the land which Leif had found soon gained wide support. The leading proponent was Eirik's son, Thorstein, a good, wise, and popular man. Eirik was also urged to go, as people valued most his good fortune and leadership. For a long time he was against going, but when his friends urged him, he did not refuse. They made ready the ship on which Thorbjorn had sailed to Greenland, with 20 men to go on the journey. They took the few trading goods, but all the more weapons and provisions. The morning that he left, Eirik took a small chest containing gold and silver. He hid the money and then went on his way. After going only a short way, he fell from his horse, breaking several ribs and injuring his shoulder, so that he cried out, "Ow, ow!" Because of his mishap, he sent word to his wife to retrieve the money he had hidden, saying that he had been punished for having hidden it. They then sailed out of Eiriksfjord in fine spirits, pleased with their prospects. They were tossed about at sea for a long time and failed to reach their intended destination. They came in sight of Iceland and noticed birds from Ireland. The ship was driven to and fro across the sea until they returned to Greenland in the autumn, worn out and poor in shape, and made land when it was almost winter in Eiriksfjord. Eirik then spoke. More cheerful we were in the summer to leave this fjord than now to return to it, though we have much to welcome us. Thorstein spoke. We'd be doing the generous thing by seeing to those men who have no house to go to and providing for them over the winter. Eirik answered, It's usually true, as they say, that you can't know a good question until you have the answer, and so it'll turn out here. We'll do as you say. All those men who had no other house to go to were taken in by father and son for the winter. They went home to Brattahlid and spent the winter there. The next thing was to be told of the proposal made by Thorstein Eiriksson to Gudrid Thorbjarnadottir. He was given a favourable answer by both Gudrid and her father, and so Thorstein married Gudrid, and the wedding was held at Brattahlid that autumn. The wedding feast was a grand one, and the guests were many. Thorstein had a farm and livestock in the western settlement at a place called Lysefjord. A man there named Thorstein owned a half share in this farm. His wife was named Sigrid. Thorstein and Gudrid went to his namesake in Lysefjord that autumn, where they were received very warmly. They spent the winter there. It then happened that sickness struck the farm shortly after the beginning of the winter. The foreman, named Gardi, was an unpopular man. He was the first to fall ill and die. It was not long until the inhabitants caught the sickness, one after the other, and died, and Thorstein Eiriksson and Sigrid, the farmer's wife, fell ill too. One evening, Sigrid wanted to go to the outhouse, which stood opposite the door of the farmhouse. Gudrid went with her. As they looked at the doorway, Sigrid cried, "Oh!" Gudrid spoke. "We have acted carelessly. You shouldn't be exposed to the cold at all. We must get back inside as quickly as possible." Sigrid answered, "I won't go out with things as they are. All of those who are dead are standing there before the door. Among them I recognize your husband Thorstein and myself as well. How horrible to see it." When it had passed, she spoke. "I don't see them now." Thorstein, whom she had seen with a whip in his hand, ready to strike the dead, had also disappeared. They then entered the house. Before morning came, she was dead, and the coffin was made for her body. That same day, men were going fishing, and Thorstein accompanied them down to where the boats were beached. Towards dusk, he went again to check on their catch. Then Thorstein Eiriksson sent him word to come to him, saying that there was no peace at home, and that the farmer's wife was trying to rise up and get into the bed with him. When he entered, she had reached to the sideboards of the bed. He took hold of her and drove an axe into her breast. Okay. Thorstein Eiriksson died near sundown. Thorstein told Gudrid to lie down and sleep. He would keep watch over the bodies that night. He said. Gudrid did so, and soon fell asleep. Only a little of the night had passed when Thorstein rose up, saying that he wished Gudrid to be summoned and wanted to speak to her. "It is God's will that I be granted an exception for this brief time to improve my prospects." Thorstein went to Gudrid, woke her, and told her to cross herself and ask the Lord for help. Thorstein Eiriksson has spoken to me and said he wanted to see you. It is your decision. I will not advise you either way. She answered, It may be that there is a purpose for this strange occurrence, and it will have consequences long to be remembered. I expect that God will grant me his protection. I will take the chance, with God's mercy, of speaking to him, as I cannot escape any threat to myself. I would rather he not look farther, and I expect that would be the alternative. Gudrid then went to see Thorstein, and he seemed to her to shed tears. He spoke several words in her ears in a low voice, so that she alone heard, and said that those men rejoiced who kept their faith well, and it brought mercy and salvation. Yet he said that many kept their faith poorly. The practices will not do which have been followed here in Greenland after the coming of Christianity, burying people in unconsecrated ground with little, if any, service said over them. I want to have my corpse taken to a church, along with those of the other people who have died there. But Garthi should be burned on a pyre straight away, as he caused all the hauntings which had occurred here this winter. He also spoke of the situation and declared that her future held great things in store, but he warned her against marrying a Greenlander. He also asked her to donate the money to a church or to the poor people, and then he sank down for the second time. It had been common practice in Greenland since Christianity had been adopted to bury people in unconsecrated ground on the farms where they died. A pole was set up on the breast of each corpse until a priest came. Then the pole was poured out and consecrated water poured into the hole and a burial service performed, even though this was only done much later. The bodies were taken to a church in Eiriksfjord, and priests held burial services for them. After this, Thorbjorn died. All his money went to Gudrid. Eirik invited her to live with him, and saw that she was well provided for. Chapter 7. There was a man named Thorfinn Karlsefni, the son of Thord Horsehead, who lived in North Iceland, at a place now called Reinines in Skagafjord. Karlsefni was a man of good family and good means. His mother was named Thorun. He went on trading voyages and was a merchant of good repute. One summer, Karlsefni made his ship ready for a voyage to Greenland. Snorri Thorbrandsson of Alftafjord was to accompany him, and they took a party of 40 men with them. I'm going to get a drink. Hold on a second. Good. A man named Bjarni Grimolfsson from Breiðafjord and another named Thorhall Gamlason from the East Fjords made their ship ready the same summer as Karlsefni and were heading also to Greenland. There were 40 men on the ship. The two ships set sail once they had made ready, but there is no mention of how long they were at sea, but it is said that both these ships sailed into Eiriksfjord that autumn. Eirik rowed to the ships, along with other Greenlanders, and busy trading commenced. The skippers of the vessels invited Eirik to take his pick of their wares, and Eirik repaid them generously, as he invited both crews home to stay to the winter with him, in Brattahlid. This the merchants accepted and went home with him. Their goods were later transported to Brattahlid, where there was no lack of good and ample outbuildings to store them in. The merchants were highly pleased with the winter stay with Eirik. But as the Yuletide approached, Eirik grew sadder than was his wont. On one occasion, Karlsefni spoke to him privately and asked, "Is something troubling you, Eirik? You seem to me to be more silent than before. You have treated us very generously, and we owe it to you to repay you by any means we can. Tell me, what is causing your sadness?" Eirik answered, "You have also accepted with gratitude and respect, and I don't feel that your contribution to our exchange has been lacking in any way. But I'll regret it if word gets around that you've spent a Yuletide, as lean as the one now approaching." Karlsefni answered, "It won't be that at all. We've malt and flour and grain aboard our ships, and you may help yourself to them as you will, to prepare a feast worthy of your generous hospitality." Eirik accepted this. Preparations for the Yule feast began, which proved to be so bountiful that men could scarcely recall having seen its like. After Yule, Karlsefni approached Eirik to ask for his hand, for Gudrid's hands. hand, as it seemed to him that she was under Eirik's protection, and both an attractive and knowledgeable woman. Eirik answered that he would support his suit and that she was a fine match, and it's likely that her fate will turn out as prophesied. He added, even if she did marry Karlsefni, whom he knew to be a worthy man. The subject was broached with Gudrid, and she allowed herself to be guided by Eirik's advice. No more needs to be said on that point, except that the match was agreed and the celebrations extended to include the wedding which took place. Winter there was much merrymaking in Brattahlid. Many board games were played. There was storytelling and plenty of other entertainment to brighten the life of the household. So far, so good. There were great discussions that winter in Brattahlid of Snorri and Karlsefni setting sail for Vinland, and people talked at length about it. In the end, Snorri and Karlsefni made their vessel ready, intending to sail in search of Vinland that summer. Bjarni and Thorhall decided to accompany them on the voyage, taking their own ship and their companions who had sailed with them on the voyage out. Excuse me. A man named Thorvard was married to Freydis, who was an illegitimate daughter of Eric the Red. How surprising. He went with them, along with Thorvald, Eirik's son, and Thorhall, who was called the Huntsman. For years he had accompanied Eirik on hunting trips in the summers and was entrusted with many tasks. Thorhall was a large man, dark and coarse-featured, and he was getting on in years and difficult to handle. He was a silent man, who was not generally given to conversation, devious and yet insulting in his speech, and who usually did his best to make trouble. He had paid scant heed to the faith since it had come to Greenland. Thorhall was not popular with most people, but he had long been in Eirik's confidence. He was among those on the ship with Thorvald and Thorvard, and he had a wide knowledge of the uninhabited regions. They had the ship which Thorbjorn had brought to Greenland and set sail with Karlsefni and his group. Most of the men aboard were from Greenland. The crews of the three ships made 100 plus 40 men. They sailed along the coast to the western settlement, and then to the Bear Islands, and from there with a northerly wind. After 2 days at sea, they sighted land and rowed over in boats to explore it. There they found many flat slabs of stone, so large that 2 men could lie foot to foot across them. There were many foxes there. They gave the land the name Helluland, stone slab land. As I mentioned earlier, that is Baffin Island in Canada. After that, they sailed with a northerly wind for 2 days and again sighted land, with large forests and many animals. An island lay to the southeast off the coast, where they discovered a bear, and they named it Bjarney, Bear Island, and the forested land itself, Markland. Markland is, as you remember, well, I would probably assume you remember if you've been here. If not, Markland is Newfoundland, the island of Newfoundland, and parts of Labrador in Canada. Bjarney is... Where's Bjarney? I forget. Let me look for it on the map. Oh, this is a tiny island in between Newfoundland and Labrador. Okay. After another 2 days passed, they again sighted land and approached the shore where a peninsula jutted out. They sailed upwind along the coast, keeping the land on the starboard. The country was wild, with a long shoreline and sand flats. They rowed ashore in boats, and discovering the keel of a ship there, named this port Kjalarnes, Keel Point, which was the higher of the 2 points in Cape Breton Island in Nova Scotia, in Canada. They also gave the beaches the name Furðustrandir. Furðustrandir is where Halifax is, the Wonder Beaches. Very interesting name. For their surprising length. After this, the coastline was indented with numerous inlets which they skirted in their ships. When Leif had served King Olaf Tryggvason and was told by him to convert Greenland to Christianity, the king had given him two Scots, a man named Haki and a woman called Hekja. The king told him to call upon them whenever he needed someone with speed, as they were fleeter of foot than any deer. Leif and Eirik had sent them to accompany Karlsefni. After sailing the length of the Furustrandir, they put the two Scots ashore and told them to run southwards to explore the country and return before 3 days' time had elapsed. They were dressed in an armament known as a kjafal, which had a hood at the top but no arms, and was open at the sides and fastened between the legs with a button and a loop, and they wore nothing else. The ships cast anchor and lay to during this time. After 3 days had passed, the two returned to the shore, one of them with grapes in hand, and the other with self-sown wheat. Karlsefni said that they had found good land. After taking them on board once more, they sailed onwards until they reached a fjord cutting into the coast. They steered the ships into the fjord with an island near its mouth, where there were strong currents, and called the island Strömsö, Stream Island, which is near Maine in the United States, an island off the coast of Maine. There were so many birds that they could hardly walk without stepping on eggs. They sailed up into the fjord, which they called Strömsfjord, unloaded the cargo from the ships, and began settling in. Strömsfjord is the Bay of Fundy, I think is what it's called. The Bay of Fundy. Yes, I was correct. Do we have any Canadians on the chat? They had brought all the sorts of livestock with them and explored the land and its resources. There were mountains there, and a pleasant landscape. They paid little attention to things other than exploring the land. The grass there grew tall. They spent the winter there, and it was a harsh winter, which they had made little preparation, where they grew short of food and caught nothing when hunting or fishing. They went out to the island, expecting to find some prey to hunt or food on the beaches. They found little food, but their livestock improved there. After this, they entreated God to send them something to eat, but the response was not as quick in coming as their need was urgent. Thorhall disappeared, and the men went to look for him. They searched for 3 days, and on the fourth, Karlsefni and Bjarni found him at the edge of a cliff. He was staring skywards, with his mouth, nostrils, and eyes wide open, scratching and pinching himself and mumbling something. They asked what he was doing there, and he replied that it made no difference. He said that they need not to look so surprised, and said for most of his life he had got along without their advice. They told him to come back with them, and he did so. Shortly afterwards, they had found a beached whale and flocked to the site to carve it up. Although they failed to recognize what type it was, Karlsefni had wide knowledge of whales, but even he did not recognize it. The cooks boiled the meat and they ate it, but it made everyone ill. Thorhall then came up and spoke. Didn't old Redbeard prove to be more help than your Christ? This was my payment for the poem I composed about Thor, my guardian, who seldom disappointed me. Once they heard this, no one wanted to eat the whale meat. They cast it off a cliff and threw themselves on God's mercy. The weather improved so that they could go fishing, but from then they had supplies in plenty. In the beginning, they moved further into Strömsfjord and lived on the produce of both shores and the fjord, hunting game inland, gathering eggs on the island, and fishing at sea. They then began to discuss the plan and continuation of their journey. Thorhall wanted to head north, past Furustrandir and around Kjalarnes to seek Vinland. Karlsefni wished to sail south along the east shore, feeling that land would be more substantial the farther south it was, and he felt it was advisable to explore both. Thorhall then made his ship ready to close to the island, and with no more than 9 men to accompany him. The rest of their company went with Karlsefni. One day, as Thorhall was carrying water aboard his ship, he drank of it and spoke this verse. With promises of fine drinks, the war trees wheedled, spurring me to journey to these scanty shores. War oak of the helmet god, I now wield but a bucket. No sweet wine do I sup, stooping at the spring. Or translating some of the kennings. With promises of fine drinks, the warriors wheedled, spurring me to journey these scanty shores. Warrior of Odin, I now wield but a bucket. No sweet wine do I sup, stooping at the spring. After that they set out, and Karlsefni followed them as far as the island. Before hoisting the sail, Thorahall spoke this verse. We'll return to where our countrymen await us, head our sand heaven's horse, to scout this ship's wide plains. Let the wielders of sword storms laud the land unwearied, settle wonder beaches, and serve up their wail. Or, once again, translating some of the kennings. We'll return to where our countrymen await us. Uh, head our sea ship to scout the ships wide to scout the seas. Let the warriors laud the land unwearied, settle wonder beaches, and serve up their wail. They then separated, and Thorhall and his crew sailed north past Furthestandr in Kjalarnes, and from there attempted to sail to the west of it. But they ran into storms and were driven ashore in Ireland, where they were beaten and enslaved. There Thorhall died. Rip. Rip in pepperoni. It's called Chapter 10. Karlsefni headed south around the coast with Snorri and Bjarni and the rest of their company. They sailed a long time until they came to a river which flowed into a lake and from there into the sea. There were wide sandbars beyond the mouth of the river, and they could only sail into the river at high tide. Karlsefni and his company sailed into the lagoon and called the land Hop, tidal pool. Now, fun fact, Hop is New York City. So the river they were talking about is the Hudson River. So the Vikings explored as far south as New York City, and Long Island. There they found fields of self-sown wheat in the low-lying areas and vines growing on the hills. Every stream was teeming with fish. They dug trenches along the high water mark, and when the tide ebbed, there were halibut in them. Here's a footnote. Although the Icelandic word helgir literally holy fishes, means halibut in English, these could be any type of flatfish. There were a great number of deer of all kinds in the forest. They usually stayed there for a fortnight, enjoying themselves and finding nothing unusual. They had taken their livestock with them. Early one morning they noticed 9 hide-covered boats, and the people in them waved wooden poles that made a swishing sound as they turned them around sunwise. Karlsefni then spoke. What can this mean? Snorri replied, It may be a sign of peace. We should take a white shield and lift it up in return. This they did. The others then rowed towards them and were astonished at the sight of them as they landed on the shore. They were short in height, with threatening features and tangled hair on their heads. Their eyes were large and their cheeks broad. They had stayed there a while, marveling, and then rowed away again to the south around the point. The group had built their booths up above the lake, with some of the huts farther inland, and others close to the shore. They remained there that winter. There was no snow at all, and the livestock could fend for themselves out of doors. One morning, as spring advanced, they noticed a large number of hide-covered boats rowing up from the south around the point. There were so many of them as it looked as bits of coal had been tossed over the water, and there was a pole waving from each boat. They signaled with their shields and began trading with the visitors, who mostly wished to trade for red cloth. They also wanted to purchase swords and spears, but Karlsefni and Snorri forbade this. They traded dark pelts for cloth, and for each pelt they took cloth a hand in length, which they bound about their heads. This went on for some time until there was little cloth left. Then they cut the cloth into smaller pieces, each no wider than a finger's width, but the natives gave just as much for it or more. At this point, a bull, owned by Karlsefni and his companions, ran out of the forest and bellowed loudly. The natives took fright at this, ran to their boats, and rowed off to the south. 3 weeks passed, and there was no sign of them. After that, they saw a large group of native boats approach from the south, as thick as a steady stream. They were waving poles counter-sunwise now, and all of them were shrieking loudly. The men took up their red shields and headed toward them. They met and began fighting. A hard barrage rained down, and the natives also had catapults. Karlsefni and Snorri then saw the natives lift up on poles a large round object, about the size of a sheep's gut and black in color, and which came flying up onto the land and made a threatening noise when it landed. It struck great fear into Karlsefni and his men, who decided their best course was to flee upriver, since the native party seemed to be attacking from all sides, until they reached a cliff wall where they could put up a good fight. Freydis came out of the camp as they were fleeing. She called, "Why do you flee, such miserable opponents? Men like you who look to me to be capable of killing them off like sheep. Had I a weapon, I'm sure I would fight better than any of you." They paid no attention to what she said. Freydis wanted to go with them, but moved somewhat slowly as she was with child. She followed them into the forest, but the natives reached her. She came across a slain man, Thorbrand Snorrason, who had been struck in the head by a slab of stone. His sword lay beside him, and this she snatched up and prepared to defend herself with it as the natives approached her. Freeing one of her breasts from her shift, she smacked the sword with it. This frightened the natives, who turned and ran back to their boats and rowed away. An odd strategy, but it worked. Evidently. Okay. Karlsefni and his men came back to her and praised her luck. 2 of Karlsefni's men were killed and many of the natives were slain, yet Karlsefni and his men were outnumbered. They returned to the booths, wondering who these numerous people were who had attacked them on land, but it now looked to them as if the company in the boats had been the sole attackers, and any other attackers had only been an illusion. The natives also found one of the dead men whose axe lay beside him. One of them picked up an axe and chopped at a tree, and then each took his turn at it. They thought this thing which cut so well a real treasure. One of them struck a stone, and the axe broke. He thought a thing which could not withstand stone to be of little worth, and tossed it away. The party then realized that, despite everything the land had to offer there would be under constant threat of attack from its prior inhabitants. They made ready to depart for their own country. Sailing north along the shore, they discovered 5 natives sleeping in skin sacks near the shore. Beside them, they had vessels filled with deer marrow blended with blood. They assumed these men to be outlaws and killed them. They then came to a headland thick with deer. The point looked like a huge dunghill, as the deer gathered there at night to sleep. They then entered Stormfjord, where they found food in plenty. Some people say that Bjarni and Gudrid had remained there with 100 others and gone no farther, and that it was Karlsefni and Snorri who went further south with 40 men, stayed no more than 2 months at Hop, and returned the same summer. The group stayed there while Karlsefni went on one ship to look for Thorhall. They sailed north around Kjalarnes Point and then westwards of it, keeping the land on their port side. They saw nothing but wild forest. When they had sailed for a long time, they reached a river flowing from east to west. They sailed into the mouth of the river and lay near the south bank. This river in question is the St. Lawrence River in what is now Quebec. Chapter 12. One morning, Karlsefni's men saw something shiny above a clearing in the trees, and they called out. It moved, and proved to be a one-legged creature which darted down where the ship lay tied. Thorvald, Eirik the Red's son, was at the helm, and the one-legged man shot an arrow into his intestine. Thorvald drew the arrow out and spoke. Fat paunch that was. We've found a land of fine resources, though we'll hardly enjoy much of them. Thorvald died, and from the wound shortly after. The one-legged man then ran off back north. They pursued him and caught glimpses of him now and again. He then fled into a cove, and they turned back. One of the men then spoke this verse. True it was that our men tracked a one-legged creature down the shore. The uncanny fellow fled in a flash. Though rough was his way, hear us, Karlsefni, their danger. They saw the mountains which felt to be the same as those near Hop, and both these places seemed to be equally far away from Stormsjord. They returned to spend their third winter in Stormsjord. Many quarrels arose, as the men who had no wives sought to take those of the married men. Karlsefni's son Snorri was born there in the first autumn when 3 years old, and was 3 years old when they left. They had southerly winds and reached Markland, where they met 5 natives. One was bearded, 2 were women, and 2 of them children. Karlsefni and his men caught the boys, but the others escaped and disappeared into the earth. They took the boys with them and taught them their language and had them baptized. They called their mother Vethhild and their father Ovaigi. They said that their kings ruled the land of the natives. One of them was called Avaldamon, and the other Valdidida. No houses were there, they said, but people slept in caves or holes. They spoke of another land across from their own. There people dressed in white clothing, shouted loudly, and bore poles and waved banners. This people was assumed to be the land of the white men. There's a footnote here. Some scholars have suggested this refers to Native Americans, others to a Christian ceremony, as the term white men was used for Christians. One manuscript supplies the explanation that it refers to Ireland the Great. Then they came to Greenland and spent the winter with Eirik the Red. Chapter 13. Bjarni Grimolfsson and his group were born into the Greenland Straits and entered Madkasjö, the Sea of Worms. Although they failed to realize it until the ship under them had become infested with shipworms. They then discussed what to do. They had a ship's boat in tow which had been smeared with tar made of seal blubber. It is said that shell maggots cannot infest wood smeared with such tar. The majority proposed to set as many men into the boat as it would carry. When this was tried, it turned out to have room for no more than half of them. Bjarni then said that they should decide by lot who should go into the boat, and did not decide by status. Although all of the people there wanted to go into the boat, it couldn't take them all. So they decided to draw lots to decide who would board the boat and who would remain aboard the trading vessel. The outcome was that it fell to Bjarni and almost half of those on board to go in the boat. Those who had been selected left the ship and boarded the boat. Once they were aboard the boat, one young Icelander, who had sailed with Bjarni, called out to him, "Are you going to desert me now, Bjarni?" "So it must be," Bjarni answered. He said, "That's not what you promised when I left my father's house in Iceland to follow you." Bjarni answered, "I don't see we've much other choice now. What do you advise?" He said, "I see the solution. We change places. You come up here and I'll take your place there." "So be it," Bjarni answered, "as I see you put a high price on life and are very upset about dying." Then they changed places. The man climbed into the boat and Bjarni aboard the ship. People say that Bjarni died there in the Sea of Worms, along with the others aboard his ship. The ship's boat and those on it went on their way and made land, after which they told this tale. Chapter 14. The following summer, Karlsefni sailed for Iceland and Gudrid with him. He came home to his farm in Reynines. His mother thought his match hardly worthy, and Gudrid did not stay on the farm that first winter. But when she learned what an outstanding woman Gudrid was, Gudrid moved to the farm, and the two women got along well. Karlsefni's son Snorri had a daughter. Halfrid was the mother of Bishop Thorlak Runolfsson, Saint Thorlak, if I remember correctly. If this is the same, I believe so. He's very important to modern Icelandic society. Hmm. I could be wrong. Karlsefni and Gudrid had a son named Thorbjörn, whose daughter Thorun was the mother of Bishop Björn. Thorgerith, Snorri Karlsefni's son, was the father of Yngvild, the mother of the first Bishop Brand. And here ends this saga. That is the end of the Vinland Sagas, which are a part of the Íslendinga Sögur, the saga of the Icelanders. Thank you for listening. It means a lot. So if y'all enjoyed the stream, please do follow me on Twitter in the About tab and subscribe to the YouTube channel. For more streams. So once again, thank you. And I hope you have a good night, good day, whatever time it is for you. Make sure to tell your friends, come on by. And yeah, this is the end of the stream. I don't really know much else to say. Have a good thanks for listening. Thank you for coming by, Queenly Arts. Thank you everyone in chat who's watching. And yeah, have a wonderful night, wonderful day, wonderful afternoon if you're watching the VOD. I'm surprised you made it this far. So yeah, see you next time.